Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and welcome to part 4 of our exploration of Asian horror films released in 2015. Now, this is the final part of this video, this year in review for 2015, which means that we have now reached my personal favorite Asian horror films from this particular year. And we have a whopping 12 movies that we will be covering tonight, which is more than usual for the final part in our year in review videos. In terms of style, story, and scares, there's a lot of variety and creativity on display, as we will see. Also, the availability of most of these titles is good. You should be able to find all of them, either on physical media or streaming. And as always, titles for all of the movies I discuss will be listed in the description box below. And the first film tonight is on the creepy side, and that is The Inerasable. This is a Japanese horror film. Ai, played by Yuko Takuchi, is a horror mystery novel writer who bases some of her stories on reader submissions. She receives a letter from Kubo, played by Ai Hashimoto, a university student who is a fan of her work. Her letter states that she hears odd sounds from a room in her apartment. This novelist becomes interested by the letter, and they begin to investigate things together, learning of people that lived in the apartment and their experiences of suicide and murder. The film begins with the following statement: Kagere, meaning unclean, impure. It is always present in birth, death, disease, fire, or evil. It is said to bring bad luck and engender sin. So there's lots of narration in this movie, but it's consistently used and does a good job of setting up the horror. Now, sometimes narration could feel awkward when all of a sudden a character starts talking over the film out of nowhere and then it's not used again. But this film, it uses it consistently and well. There are some neat little foreshadowing events as well. Now, the investigation element here is also a little bit different from other Japanese horror films because it begins immediately at the start of the movie. You know, a lot of times in these Japanese horror films, especially like the ghostly ones, the investigation element will come in a little bit later when you need to kind of figure out what's going on and stop the curse or whatever, right? But this starts right from the start. You know, the entire film revolves around the investigation, so it does not feel like it's tacked on or just thrown in as a cliche at the end or in the middle. Also, the mystery revolves around a lot of people, so it does not simply reference the horrific events surrounding one or a few persons and just solves the case because of that. You know, it's a lot of people involved, so it's almost like a chain reaction effect, which I liked quite a bit. It was a pretty neat little storyline that I liked. At times, this also uses the interview style as well in the film, with the person's name shown on the screen. They're like being interviewed about something that happened or the research that they're doing. And that was also used, I believe, in the Snow White murder case and The Reason, if I remember correctly. Scare tactics are spooky, nicely directed. They have some similarities to Pulse in terms of ghost design and subtlety. This is not quite as awesome as Pulse, of course, but, you know, some of those similarities are a good thing. You'll kind of see this right from the start, right from the opening scene, as well as the first scene in Kubo's apartment. No traditional Onryo ghosts are shown in the film. At least I wouldn't classify them as such. So, you know, it avoids cliches in that aspect as well. You don't have to worry about seeing that cliche. The lack of jump scares helps. It avoids the cheap stuff. And most of the scares occur during flashbacks regarding victims of the past, which is another little change of pace. So, like, it relies on those more than horror scenes involving our current characters. Characters themselves, not developed as much as probably a lot of people would want, but since the focus is placed more on the mystery, wasn't a big problem for me. Cast is solid in this. Yuko Takuchi has been in some good stuff over the years. I reviewed Dog in a Sidecar on my channel a few years ago, so check that movie out if you can. That's a good one. Ai Hashimoto is a good young actress. Someone really needs to release her Little Forest films, the Japanese versions, with English subtitles, because those represent some of her best acting work. The director is Yoshihiro Nakamura, who has an interesting filmography. He previously directed Fish Story, Golden Slumber, again the Japanese version, and The Booth, which was a nice little Japanese horror film from the mid-2000s. Now, I will say that The Inerasable is on the slow-paced side. It's lacking in, like, the visceral scare tactics that to keep viewers awake and, like, thrilled. There are a few patches where I think it does drag a little bit. This is not like a crowd-pleasing fun horror flick or like a really terrifying horror movie. It's simply a very well-made film overall that has some spooky scenes sprinkled in. It feels more like classical and almost like a little bit relaxed in that regard, although there are, like I said, a few creepy moments. It's the kind of horror film that I'm personally receptive to, so I definitely recommend this. It's available on Region 3 DVD with subtitles. Our next film is from Taiwan. All right, I've covered a few of their films over the years in this playlist. And that is called The Tag-Along. Now, a young property agent lives with his grandmother, but one day she suddenly disappears without a reason. He begins seeing strange things in his apartment. Completely clueless as to what's going on, he begins a search for his grandmother until he finds an uncanny video in his neighbor's camera, where a little girl in red was tagging behind his grandmother while she was hiking. Now, adding stress to the situation is that his relationship with his girlfriend is becoming strained. They've been together for years, but have still not married, which kind of concerns him. And she does not want a child, but he does. So this makes him, a little bit worried. Also, he's made some big financial decisions without consulting her, which is a big no-no. So they've got their problems on top of all the supernatural stuff. This movie was hugely popular in its home country, and you can kind of see why. I mean, the premise is kind of generic on its surface, but it transitions into a pretty creative mythos. This entity is called a Mosian, which is defined as a ghost that appears as a monkey or child. And taking advantage of one's sense of guilt, it eats up one's mind. In this film, it's presented as a child with bright white eyeballs, but it does kind of move like a monkey when I think about it. So it's kind of an interesting little blend there. Even more intriguing is that the people who disappear end up reappearing again, which is very odd for a horror film. So, it's got some little unique things going on here. There's some more mythos building that's presented during the second half. This definitely has some nuances that help to distinguish it from other horror films. I don't think anyone would predict the final half hour of The Tag-Along based on what's presented near the beginning, and I like that. And right from the start, this movie has a good overall quality to it. You got fine direction and sound design. The background noises are eerie, and I like how the scares were executed. They're tempered and legitimately creepy. It has a mix of like commonplace and unorthodox stuff in it, which works. There are a few dream scene fake outs, which I'm not a fan of in general, but they do play an important psychological angle that the human characters need to overcome. So I'm kind of okay with it here. When the spirit touches a human or attacks it, it looks really painful what's happening to them. And the best horror sequences occur near the end, during the lengthy finale that occurs in a forest. I thought that that whole section of the film was pretty creative, atmospheric, and cool. It satisfied me. Now, there are some CGI effects in this that are pretty cartoonish and somewhat distracting. That is a bit of a problem, but everything else around it is good during the scares, so, again, not a big deal breaker, but I had to point it out. Performances are solid. I especially like the lead actress, Wei-Ning Su, who is very good. Her performance is natural and charismatic, makes her character easy to connect with. This is important because she gets a lot of screen time. She's kind of the main character, really. And when she gets scared, she looks terrified. She did a good job of that. And remember, her romantic relationship with the property agent is developed rather well. So the dramatic stuff assists the horror stuff in this. This is a good flick. I recommend it. If you're looking for your Asian horror fix, you want to mix it up with a different area, country, hit this one up from Taiwan. It's available on Tubi online and a Region 3 DVD as well, if you want to add it to your collection. All right, we move to Hong Kong for our next one. In the last few years, we've had some good Hong Kong stuff too, so that's good to see. And this one is Keeper of Darkness. This is kind of a horror, drama, romance, fantasy film, I guess you could call it. A real genre bender. Nick Chung directs and stars as a streetwise exorcist who has a unique method of dealing with vengeful spirits. He negotiates with them and persuades them to let go of their grudges. And after recordings of his exorcisms go viral, he attracts the attention of a murderous spirit who is targeting mediums, as well as a troublesome reporter who takes great interest in him and his close relationship with a cute female ghost. Now, there are some specific cultural nuances to this film, like rituals, reincarnation, etc. This definitely has a Hong Kong vibe to it, in terms of location shots, mixing tones, stuff like that. The tone of the film is set up actually very early, when Chung attempts to negotiate with a possessed woman. It goes for like a charming experience that is both playful and a bit creepy at the same time. It just takes itself seriously enough to work. And if you're on board with the opening 10 minutes of Keeper of Darkness, there's a very high probability that you will enjoy the entire film. It's nicely shot and acted, and Chung carries the lead role very easily. Over the years, this guy really has carved out his place as one of the better Hong Kong actors. Check out The Beast Stalker or The Stool Pigeon for two examples of what this guy can do. I also enjoyed the actresses, Cicely Choi and Amber Kuo, who round out the very likable protagonist trio. Watching how these three interact and how their relationships develop is really kind of the most entertaining aspect of the film. Having a really good core group of protagonists was a nice surprise for me the first time I watched it. CGI effects are used a lot in this movie for both the ghosts as well as some otherworldly environments, but I think it works because of the horror fantasy vibe and the fact that some ghosts are friendly. You know what I mean? I don't know. That just kind of helps to, I guess, accept some of the CGI effects if you're dealing with a friendly ghost once in a while. It's just my opinion. It is distracting at times, kind of like the tag-along, which we covered. But the difference here is that it's loaded to the brim in Keeper of Darkness, so it feels almost like an integral part of the film and the world it's creating. It's practically a supernatural thriller in spots, and it also has a bit of action and drama, too. So, I don't know. I think it works. Keeper of Darkness is cool stuff that is a bit different and more dramatically impactful than you might expect. Check it out. And Keeper of Darkness is available on Region 3 DVD with subtitles. Alright, now we've come to the first of 4 Korean films that I will be talking about tonight. All 4 of these Korean films are either underrated or underappreciated to varying degrees, in my opinion. And the first one is The Priests. After attempting suicide, a girl is in a coma and possessed by one of the 12 manifestations of evil that hide inside and threaten humans. Despite numerous failures, Father Kim, played by Yun-seok Kim, is a young rebellious seminarian, and a young rebellious seminarian named Choi, played by Dong Won-gang, must work together to expel the demonic entity from a young girl. Now, Choi must now battle with his dark inner past in order to save the girl and those around him. So the premise is really no different from many other Exorcist-themed films out there, but the execution makes this a nice watch. It begins with a nice scene involving 2 priests who have successfully transferred a demon into an animal and are attempting to transport it for execution. Things go bad, and the demon entity escapes. Then we get some decent character interaction and development before the film kind of circles back around and reconnects the main possessed girl of this film with the priest from the opening scene. So it's writing like this that kept me engaged during the slower moments when there wasn't really a lot of horror going on. There's also some dodgy backstory regarding one of our protagonists that's never really shown on screen but is referenced a few times through dialogue. Like, it might fly over your head if you're not paying attention, but they definitely insinuate certain things about Father Kim here, so just pay attention to that. The priest does infuse some Korean tradition by implementing a few shaman rituals, but the Catholic-style exorcisms take center stage. And, the focus on animals is a good change-up. For example, the seminarian is severely afraid of dogs due to a childhood traumatic experience, and that comes into play. And a pig is used in entertaining ways near the end. There are a few uneventful patches during the opening half, but the acting helps to get you through it, and the final exorcism lasts like a whopping 40 minutes and contributes some intense, creepy moments. Of course, this demon attempts to manipulate our protagonists to defeat themselves, so we get some psychological warfare here. The ending is different from what I expected, so I found it a bit satisfying. Performances by Dong-won Gang and Yun-seok Kim are top-notch. So-dam Park is also in this, and we recently saw her in Parasyte. This is a really good cast that delivers. Just another reason why I like the film. Direction is first-rate and stylish, making the visuals a joy to watch. The urban environments are captured well, especially the neon-lit nighttime street that runs close to the possessed girl's residence. Gives the film a contemporary aesthetic that contrasts the old-school exorcist rituals. Scoring and sound effects are very good. I like The Priest. I think it's a solid horror flick that overcomes its rather generic premise. This movie is available on Region 1 DVD and possibly Blu-ray. Alright, let's just stay in Korea for the next one. Let's stay. Very different film, though. And that is The Silenced. Alright. And this is set in Gyeongsang in 1938 during the Japanese occupation. The film centers on Juran, played by Bo-young Park, a sickly young girl who gets transferred to a sanatorium/girls' boarding school to recover her health. Her physical condition improves thanks to her new friend, Yun-seok, played by So-dam Park, her second appearance in a row in this video tonight, and the headmistress's special treatment program. But she soon notices that students are disappearing one by one. Determined to uncover the truth, Juran starts to investigate the mysterious happenings and the school's possible role in them. Now, Juran's mother passed away, it says, in the film, and her father and stepmother basically ditched her at the sanatorium place. And then you have Yun-seok, who is fairly popular at this school and can handle herself, but she has her own problems to deal with. In addition, the girls of this place have conflicts between each other. So you have all that going on in addition to the horror. This is a classy horror film for a number of reasons. First off, the era is during the Japanese occupation, as I mentioned. And we've seen some period horror films come out of Asia in recent years. Stuff like Inside the Girls, Fires on the Plain, and 2 more films that we'll be covering in this video later. And I like this because it gives each film its own identity in terms of setting, and it helps to mix things up in terms of the visuals. It also gives the film a classical vibe due to the clothing and set designs. This is certainly true for The Silence. Second, the focus on schoolgirl friendship is significant and properly developed. It provides a dramatic core to the story. It reminded me a little bit of Whispering Corridors. And third, the overall quality is high, with strong acting and direction. Some visual inspiration, in my opinion, seemed to have been taken from A Tale of Two Sisters, as a handful of images just looked familiar to me and similar to that film. But the story morphs into something totally different, so I really don't mind. The story in this movie has not been used that often in Korean horror, so I like that. So if you think at some point in the film that you see a generic Onryo-style ghost in the film, you may or may not be seeing that. I'll just say that much. This is a film that kind of subverts expectations and contributes a few, effective moments near the end. One thing to keep in mind is that this is not a particularly complex film in terms of character development, but the story moves at a nice pace and is interesting to watch. I like the finale, but one criticism that I would have is that I would have liked more of what it was giving us during the finale. It kind of builds up to the finale, and I think it lasts just too short. I think if they added a few more minutes to that sequence, it would have been even more satisfying. Felt a little bit anticlimactic, but still, it was good, and the film overall is pretty solid, I think. It's good stuff. The Silenced is available on Region 3 DVD with subtitles. Alright, let's go back to Japan. And this is the second part of a film I covered earlier in this playlist, and that is Parasyte Part 2. This is a science fiction horror film. Now again, I covered Part 1 earlier in this YouTube playlist. Worm-like creatures appear on Earth, take over human brains, and kill other humans for food. And continuing from the first film, this is a direct continuation, Ryoko Tamiya and her group say they seek a peaceful existence and coexistence with humanity for the sake of research. Yet, when one of her cohorts proves to have more deadly intentions, Shinichi realizes that there will be no peace until the parasites are destroyed. Determined to save the human race, Shinichi will fight the invading species, but at the cost of his own humanity, perhaps. So this sequel begins with energy and some bloody violence as the humans become more aware of the existence of these parasites on Earth and attempt to eliminate them. It's good stuff. There's a strong dramatic undercurrent, which is a common theme tonight. You know, a lot of these films have good, strong drama underneath all of their horror elements. And that's established. There are many themes that are explored in interesting ways in this as well. For example, the classification of human and alien parasite becomes a bit blurred. You know, giving opportunity for one of the main antagonists, played by Eri Fukatsu, to develop into a relatable and even somewhat likable character. Her story arc is very engaging in this. Tadanobu Asano, a fan favorite, is also sufficiently imposing as the lead villain. I really liked him in this. There are a few scenes with him and Kazuki Hidemura that I found interesting, if only because they play off of one another, and you don't see these guys in the same films very much. Also, the guy who actually played Ichi the Killer shows up in this as a human journalist who's caught in between the warring sides. And of course we have the lead actor, Shoma Somatani, who is good as usual. So, and Ai Hashimoto is in this as well. So, yeah, this movie has a good cast. Now, the second ending to this film, from what I remember, there's a second ending at the very end of it, which feels a bit contrived. I think they could have stuck a better landing at the very end, but it's a minor gripe. CGI effects, again, are used in this film, but they're actually pretty good. Like, they actually just work, you don't have to say that, they're developing a mythos or a fantasy realm or whatever. They're actually just pretty good in this, with some horrific monster designs. You know, these movies are more serious than one might expect going in, and they do get pretty intense, both in terms of violence and drama, so it's pretty amazing that the CGI effects work kind of as well as they do. They do have a cartoonish quality about them, but given what they're supposed to do, I think they work. And, these live-action Parasyte films are not as awesome as the anime series. The anime series has even more depth and awesomeness to it. But as live-action adaptations of a manga and or anime, these are legit quality alien invasion films. I really like them. And they're way better than that Venom film that came out with Tom Hardy. That movie made, tons of money. And it's not even half as good as these Japanese Parasyte films, in my opinion. I think these films are better. So, even though the films share certain similarities, that's why I'm mentioning it. But regardless, I definitely recommend these Parasyte films, from Japan. Region 1 DVD and Blu-ray box set availability. So both films come, together. Pretty easy to find. Alright, the next one. Alright, now our next film here, is, I think, one of the more underrated and underappreciated Korean horror films from the last decade. I mean, most people that seem to watch this don't really like it that much. They think it's just kind of mediocre or maybe even a bit underwhelming. I disagree. And that is Office. It's kind of a mystery horror flick. A man works as a section chief at a company. He's a family man and reliable at his job, but one day he kills his entire family and disappears. A detective questions the man's coworkers, but suspects that they are hiding something. He checks the security cameras and observes that the killer returned to work after the murders, but there's no footage that shows him leaving the building complex. This is not to be confused with the Hong Kong film Office that came out the same year, which will cause confusion. And that film's totally different and not as good as this one. Now, this film is a proficiently executed slow burn horror film that feels somewhat unconventional due to its emphasis on the relentless psychological pressures of competing in an office environment. That accentuates the situation because the boss and some of the employees are jerks, which creates an even more stressful working environment. The female lead, played by Ah Sung-ko, is like an intern who is in line for hire, but certain events may block her eventual hiring. And all of this provides a sufficient dramatic basis for the film. Again, a core theme for a lot of the films we're covering tonight. In fact, the violence in this movie was actually pretty therapeutic for me. I was kind of happy when it showed up, given the dramatic conflicts. I think that's one of the main reasons why this film works for me. It's also my interpretation that the image of this killer is kind of a representation of career stress. Office salaryman or salarywoman stress. And just keep that in mind while watching it. And I've personally worked in an office setting for almost 2 decades, so the location is very familiar to me. It just kind of connects with me that way personally. 2 additional elements that I enjoyed. Number 1, just the concept of a psycho killer who hides and lives in an office building is pretty awesome. And number 2, the fact that danger is manifested by working late at night is also very relatable for me. There have been many times where I've been like the last one out of an office, and if it's dark outside late at night, there is a certain anxiety that comes over you a little bit. You know what I mean? This movie taps that anxiety because a killer could be lurking in the building somewhere, and there's no one to help you. The way the mystery is crafted held my interest. Very nicely directed and acted. We get Ah Sung-ko, and we've seen her in movies like The Host and Snowpiercer, if I got that correctly, I think. She's really good in Office, too. I'm also a big fan of Sung-woo Bae, who's, not a name you recognize, but if you saw his face, you'd recognize him. He's been a really good supporting actor in a lot of films, and he's in this as well. The creepy vibe is earned through excellent sound design. There are some intense moments to enjoy down the stretches in particular, but I won't spoil anything for you. There's not a lot of violence on display. This relies more on suspense, and that totally works for me given the premise. There are a few elements that are open to interpretation and will kind of make you think a little bit after the movie ends, and it's good. I really enjoyed Office. I'm in the minority. I enjoy this movie more than most people, so always keep that in mind when I tell you that, even though I'm strongly recommending it. I'm saying I'm in the minority, so go in with modest expectations if you decide to watch it. Available on Region 3 DVD with subtitles. Alright, we got another pretty big one here. We're kind of on a roll tonight with entertaining films. And that is The Black Death from Thailand. This takes place in 1565 during the reign of Maha Chakravarti, husband of courageous elephant-battling Queen Suryothai. When there was a plague in an old royal capital, the tropical malady was blamed on seafaring Portuguese and Persian traders who sailed with the sickness upriver to the old capital. As far as public health crises go, it was much worse and way weirder than is reported in the history books. What does it mean exactly? Well, the opening scene of this film reveals that history is about to be rewritten with flesh-eating zombie mayhem. So I already reviewed this movie on my channel. I have a full-length review of it from a few years ago, but I'll provide a short rundown here for you. It's good. The film opens with kind of a short battle, but things quickly turn macabre when the dead soldiers turn into zombies. A nearby village then becomes the target of these monsters. A variety of characters interact with one another before the crap hits the fan. Not a lot of deep character development, but there are characters that you'll like. characters that you won't like. So there's people that you root for when the zombies attack and people that you hope die when the zombies attack. So at least it does that much. Makes it a fun viewing experience. And I must point out that there are two badass characters in this. You got a swordsman dude, and then you have a woman blacksmith who uses two big mallets to beat the zombies' heads in. I like those characters. They're cool. And speaking of zombies, a good chunk of the middle section consists of a lengthy zombie outbreak scene that's probably the highlight of the film. Very good sequence. The zombie makeup effects are good. There's enough blood and gore to please fans who like that kind of thing. The zombie, or the Black Death, is, in terms of runtime, is a little bit over 80 minutes long. So it's on the shorter side. Definitely on the shorter end of features that I've covered on this channel. And that certainly helps to make this an easy, breezy movie to watch. Goes by fast. I like the old school village setting from decades ago. Helps to distinguish the film from any other zombie films out there. Not only in terms of the time period and country of origin, but also in terms of weaponry and what the humans use to defend themselves against the zombie threat. The Black Death carves out its own identity. You're thinking, oh, it's a generic zombie film, but no. This is one with, that's set in Thailand in the year 1565. I said decades ago before, it's centuries ago. So that gives it a nice little spin. It's cool stuff. I would say my big criticism of this film is that it ends very abruptly. Very abruptly. I would say this film really kind of deserves and needs a sequel in some aspects. But after rewatching it a few times, it's so much fun to watch, I kind of forgive it. So, there hasn't been a sequel to my knowledge made, and this movie's 5 years old, so I guess there won't be. But still, don't let that deter you from checking it out. This is a cool flick. Availability, Region 3 DVD again, with English subtitles. Alright, our next title is the final Korean film of the evening, and it's arguably the best of the bunch. And that is The Piper, a horror drama hybrid. Now, this film is inspired by the Pied Piper of Hamelin legend. Shortly after the Korean War, a father wanders through the country with his son, who suffers from lung disease, and makes a stop in a remote village, where the residents are acting weird and still believe the war to be ongoing. Now, during his visit, the protagonist attempts to help the villagers with their rat infestation problem, but he gets a bit too nosy regarding the local secrets. Now, this is one of those movies that got a physical release in the United States that had a terrible cover art to it. It makes it look like a schlocky B movie. You have the lead actor there, and you have this little rat that's screaming at you, that's sitting on his shoulder, and it's I really did not like the cover design on the physical release. That's certainly not how this film is, and you can tell that fact right from the start when you start playing it. The lead actor is Seung-ryong, also known as The Man, as I call him. He's fantastic, as usual, and carries this film on his back as the lead protagonist. I love the guy. Sung-min Lee is the leader of the village, and he's an actor who has made a bigger name for himself in recent years, and is now considered to be elite by many fans of Korean cinema. So he's really good in this. And then you have Woo-hee Chun, who also has a supporting role. She was in The Wailing. And there are some high-level similarities of her character in this film and The Wailing, but she's really a very different character, so don't let that distract you when you first see her. Again, she's really good in this. So the core cast in The Piper is talented, and they deliver. You get quality performances. I like the script writing to this. Very strong. The Piper has a legitimately good story to tell. You have the opening 45 minutes. Does a very nice job of establishing the characters and the conflicts. Has some playful moments with the children and the villagers, kind of mix things up. The rat capture scene is actually really neat. Very amusing, despite being maybe a bit unrealistic. But that's okay. There's also an uneasy tension under the surface regarding Sung-min Lee's character. He seems to have some dubious ulterior motives for some of his actions. Early on, you might even like question if this film is a horror film or not, because it really focuses on the drama. But it does build that nice dramatic impact, and things get gradually more and more intense as it moves along. The horror elements are mostly backloaded to the second half, but the scares are pretty good. It's not a terrifying film. It has, again, like a classical, not maybe fairy tale style, but really kind of classical feel to it. Dramatically based horror to it. Outside of like the uneasy tension stuff that I mentioned, there are some spooky shots. I really liked like the white smoke that was used at one point in the film. It's really kind of, I don't know, kind of eerie. And the rats. There's a ton of them in this movie. They had to have been CGI'd in, but it works. They're good. Sometimes they get hungry, and that provides some of the bloodier bits of the film. Again, this is just old school, classy, legend-inspired horror that gives a form of justification for the horrific acts that occur. So, The Piper, man, it's pretty solid stuff. Check it out. It's on Amazon Streaming and Region 1 DVD. Those are United States releases. Again, if you want to keep up with Korean horror, there's some good stuff from this year. All right. We're in our top 3. In my opinion, they're all from Japan. All right. Our next title is one of, I don't know, maybe I'm alone on this, but it's one of the scariest Japanese horror films I've seen in recent memory. I talk about it quite a bit on this channel, even though I've never really done a review of it. And that is Yami Douga 12, also known as Tokyo Videos of Horror 12. This is an anthology. Here's the introduction that they give you. In the modern cities where all of the darkness is said to be gone, there still exists the darkness that is everlasting from ancient times. The darkness of the dead that appears on the verge of this world. The underworld is always waiting for a chance to drag us down into the dark side. And there is another darkness that is still growing. Haven't you forgotten where the darkness grows most enormously? Yes, it grows within our distorted heart. Sometimes the camera captures the darkness of such moments, the videos that are born from the darkness, and are to be buried in the darkness. Let us introduce you to what the camera catches in the darkness. Yami Douga. They actually make that intro, I think, to every installment, but I wanted to wait to give it to you until I covered my favorite installment of the bunch that I've seen. Again, this is an anthology of 3 documentary-style recordings. In the first story, The Man with the Chair, the video in question was sent to a television station that covers horror-related programs. The TV producer gives a brief introduction and then shows the video. Then she interjects at times to discuss what happens. 3 young men investigate the site of a suicide. Now, this is a surprisingly scary sequence involving a chair made from human bones and hair. And I gotta be honest, this movie pretty much scared the crap out of me. It did. There's a lot of suspense and really no dull filler at all in it. No use of the Onryo ghost either, so you don't have to worry about that. Very different spiritual entity that's shown here. And I rewatched this Yami Douga 12 about a month ago in the morning on the weekend, and I still had the jitters later in the night when I went to bed. So I don't know, man. This one kind of got to me. It got to me. I really enjoyed the first story in this anthology. In the second story, Something Black, the video in question was obtained from a man who was in medical school. He retrieved it from his professor after he passed away. A man is hanging out at home and relaxing, recording a diary for the purposes of documenting his life for use in psychiatric therapy, but a mysterious shadow is stalking him. Now, this is less eventful than the first segment in this anthology, but it does have its moments. I mean, a few moments you could consider to be a little bit cheesy, but I liked it. It is the weakest story, though, of this, batch of films. Then we have the third story. The video in question is recorded as part of a television program, so the producer hears that a particular apartment continues to go vacant, and people refuse to stay there. So the premise of his show is that he'll have 2 J-pop idols stay there for the night. But before production begins, they get 2 assistant producers, 2 young ladies, to stay there and scout the location for a few days. Just feel it out. They witness a man praying at the spot of a deadly accident, then hear strange noises within the apartment. They use 2 cameras, a stationary one and a handy cam inside this apartment. So there are moments where one camera will miss a paranormal event, but another one will catch it. Okay? And so you'll see that something was happening that you didn't know about previously in the film. And it's pretty good. Those are some of the best scenes. Very solid, like, paranormal activity style segment that is pretty creepy and likely not something you'll want to watch before going to bed. It's kind of simplistic because it focuses on creepy noises and some captured imagery, but it's very effective. As much as the Onryo ghost is a cliche nowadays, it is used in this story, and it still freaked me out. It really did. Unbelievably, this movie made Onryo ghost scary again. So, you have the first segment, which is just, it's pretty scary, and then you have this one, which uses an Onryo ghost that's pretty scary. One thing I liked about each of these segments is that it makes sense why the protagonist would continue filming, at least in most of them. In the first story, the camera had a big light attached so they could see where they're going. In the second story, the patient is attempting to convince his doctor that he's seeing this evil entity that exists. And the third story, the video is kind of part of their job, which may not be the best excuse, but still. And one of the cameras is stationary anyway. So, even if the camcorder goes out, the stationary cam is still going to be filming. So in terms of supernatural scariness, I think this anthology delivers. It's only 70 minutes long. Check it out. I don't hear many people talk about these films. They're all on Amazon streaming in the United States. At least most of them still are, I think. And you have to look for it under the other English title. Tokyo Videos of Horror. Check out the 12th installment first, and let me know what you think, because this one got to me, man. Alright, we stick to Japan. Alright, but it's another zombie film, and that is I Am a Hero, a horror thriller. So in this one, we have an underachieving manga assistant. He's, kind of underappreciated as well at work, and he's lost the passion in his relationship with his girlfriend. Not going too well for this guy. Well, things are about to get much worse because a mysterious zombie virus suddenly spreads throughout Japan, causing widespread panic. This manga assistant gets caught up in the chaos. Excuse me. So he requests assistance from his trusty shotgun. Now, the premise of a zombie outbreak is generic. It's overplayed, been done to death at this point in cinematic history. But this movie somehow is able to make itself memorable and carve out its own identity, like a lot of the other films we're talking about tonight. The monster designs of these zombies are pretty awesome. Excessively nasty looking, with an emphasis on like off-center eyeballs, like irrational speech, awkward ghost movements. They're almost like rabid demons or something. It's pretty cool. Some of the zombies are old school Romero slow walkers. Other zombies move quickly. Okay? So this movie mixes it up that way. I like that. There's also a memory element to the zombies that's different from most zombie movies. So it adds some things. It mixes it up. Creates its own flashy, like, zombie, traits. There are a few surprises along the way as well. The action is pretty exciting and fun to watch, man. It relies mostly on, like, realistic, bloody violence with a sprinkling of over-the-top stuff. There's a satisfying amount of gory violence in this one. I know that's something people complained about with Train to Busan. It wasn't gory enough. You get more gore in I Am a Hero. Some good death scenes in this for sure. Pacing is good. We get our first zombie attack with about 15 minutes in. And then we get a few more in quick succession. I would say the opening 40 minutes are just action-packed. Then it slows down a bit after that. In the middle section, new human characters are introduced. The film kind of resets, and additional conflicts emerge. But the zombies are always around. And then you get the last 40 minutes, which are action-packed. So the film just finishes strong. The character moments also add some drama. They're nicely written. Masami Nagasawa shows up near the midpoint, and she's really good as usual. There's some black humor to enjoy as well. Now, the runtime for this one is over 2 hours, but it does not feel like it. It really does not. This was directed by Shinsuke Sato, who is currently the go-to guy in Japan when it comes to manga adaptations, if only because he's actually pretty good and consistent at it, at directing these films. I mean, Inuyashiki is one of the best superhero films from the last decade, from any country that I've seen. So Sato, I want a sequel to I Am a Hero. It's been 5 years. Let's make it happen. And there's more things they could do with it. It's like the two minor criticisms is that sometimes there are some questionable reaction times to characters who are faced with danger. And there's one side character in this who's really cool, but underused. I don't know if they planned on doing more with that character in the sequel or not, but I want to see that in the sequel. Give that underused character their chance to shine. So, I mean, I Am a Hero is just a fantastic crowd pleaser. You gotta watch it. You really should. It's available on Amazon Streaming and Region 1 DVD and Blu-ray, actually. Alright, we're finally at my favorite Asian horror film from 2015. In my opinion, it was kind of a clear choice, and we've covered a lot of good stuff, really good stuff tonight. But this one, man, I just freaking love it. That is Tag, also known as Real Onigokko, a horror thriller. Now, this is not to be confused with the prior Real Onigokko films from Japan, which were of a lower budget. I watched the first one of that series years ago because I believe Mitsuki Tanimura was in it, and I thought it sucked. This Sion Sono version that we're discussing tonight from 2015 is a one to watch. It has a different story than the lower budget version, but it also has some similarities. Most notably, the need for our protagonist to run a lot. Oh yes, there's a lot of running in this film. So the basic premise, and I don't want to tell you too much, a schoolgirl witnesses the mass execution of her classmates by an apparently unnatural force, but becomes confused when faced with subsequent events. This film by Sion Sono begins with a lengthy, bloody, deliciously entertaining sequence that is one of the best in recent memory. I think it's better than the one in Suicide Club. That's saying something. If you do not like the beginning of this movie, I don't know what to tell you. This film is directed with so much energy, it's insane. The camera work in this movie is the best of Sono's entire career. I'm not overstating this. It really is. He uses a ton of just like spectacular tracking shots, some of which are taken at very high elevations. The movement of the camera in Tag helps to make it just a constantly entertaining film on like a minute-by-minute basis. Sono directed the heck out of this film. The score, really good. The more ambient instrumental stuff was contributed by a Japanese band called Mono. Listen to some of their stuff. It's pretty freaking intense. So aesthetically, Tag is just phenomenal. The script keeps the viewer guessing. It keeps you guessing from start to finish. You're constantly thinking, like, what the heck's going on? It's got this intriguing start, and, more clues start emerging, and you're thinking, like, what's going on here? A small handful of possible explanations come to mind while watching this. The ending was more nuanced and unpredictable than what I expected. Still a little bit surrealistic and has some ambiguities to it, but it's easily understandable on a high level. There are a bunch of different themes that are touched upon in this film, a bunch. I don't want to talk about them because you should go into this movie knowing as little as possible about the content and events. Even if I told you some of the themes, you'd go into the movie with that preconception, and you may, interpret it differently because of that. So I would say watch this movie cold after you listen to my review. However, after you watch it, check out the Cinema Nippon YouTube channel's interpretation video, because they got a bunch of people to come in to do like their own interpretation of this film and what it means. And that was a fantastic video on YouTube, so I'll include a link in the description box below. I like the lead actresses. Raina Trendle has the lead role. There's just something charismatic about this actress that draws you in. You know, she holds the screen, you know, and does a great job of acting paranoid and scared, I'll tell you that much. Yuki Sakurai is the supporting actress. One of her most memorable roles in recent years was The Limit of Sleeping Beauty, which I reviewed on this channel. And then we get Mariko Shinoda. She was the female assassin from Reborn. She's also in this. So you got a good cast, like most of the films this evening. Now, in terms of the horrific content, this movie freaking delivers. The body count is excessive for a horror film. I mean, it's absurd. Really excessive. And I love it. It has variety, too. It's suspenseful at times. It's thrilling at times. Even a little bit creepy at times. Remember that stupid movie, The Happening, where the wind was meant to be scary? Well, there are moments in Tag where the wind is indeed vicious and totally convincing in its viciousness. So, sometimes you wonder how Sono can make this stuff work, but he does. I mean, I would say that Tag is more of a fun horror movie than a disturbing one. It really is. But it's a lot of fun to watch. It's only 84 minutes long. No fat or dull filler whatsoever. This sucker starts with a bang and it moves. Very creative and unique gem for one of the best contemporary directors on the planet. In my opinion, this is quite simply one of the most purely entertaining Japanese horror films of all time. I could see myself rewatching this like multiple times a year for the rest of my life. So this is, I think this film's legit. It kind of surprises me that it doesn't get even higher reviews and acclaim that it has gotten. You know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's available on YouTube, Tubi, DVD, and Blu-ray, so you can't complain about the availability of this one. But that's my favorite one for this year, so there you have it. This video was basically my top 12 favorite Asian horror films from 2015. I think it's a pretty strong, impressive list. You know, lots of entertaining stuff, lots of variety. We have 2 zombie films, and they're both like completely different from one another, really. So, yeah, good stuff. I don't know if I'm quite ready to take on 2016 in Asian horror, but I think we've reached a point in this playlist where some addendums are in order. You know, I've seen a pretty good chunk of Asian horror films between 1965 and 2014 that I saw after I completed those years on this playlist. So it might be a good idea to cover some of those movies that I missed the first time around. You know, just add more reviews. You know, I have enough reviews to fill maybe 4 more videos, so maybe I'll do that in the upcoming months. And then we'll hit 2016 a little later down the line. So look out for those. And check out some of the films that I've covered tonight, man. There's some good stuff. And as always, I'll see you next time.